Hello, welcome to What the Flip. This is Victor Vogel, your host, and I'm continuing my series on teams and virtual workforces and virtual work teams. Um, Today, we're going to talk about the phase that's associated with team development or the actual development of the team itself. Yesterday we talked a lot about what a team was, what it consisted of, the dynamics of it, how it was similar to your standard work environment, how it was different from the standard work environment. Some of the things that team leaders expected out of the workforce and the workforce needed out of the distance manager, the team manager, virtual manager. It's always good to probably go back and pick up what you missed from the previous. If you can attend a session or you choose not to attend a session, but you still want to get the data, I'm trying to do that for you by making that available over the net. Each one I put in will have about a 30-day time parameter for you to go in and look at that. And it's going to require you to have registered for the course or go ahead and register to get in to view it. So there are some things that I talk about that are proprietary. So some of them I'm not going to go into depth on in terms of exactly how to do it. That's not the purpose of these sessions. These sessions are just to try to enlighten you a little bit about virtual workforces and the idea that they are different and they require uh, leaders and the workforce itself to be aware of the differences and how the expectations and those things, and also how complicated a virtual workforce can really be. It's not one of those things where you just hand somebody a computer and an iPhone and say, "Okay, go home and work." So what I'd like to do is just briefly go into share my screen with you a little bit, and then just basically walk you through some of the dynamics that are associated with putting your team together, getting it ready to operate effectively. Now, understand this isn't something you do in a 2 hour session. This is going to take some time and it's ongoing. It doesn't stop once you get your team into gear. There's some things you do to go back and maintenance and change and adapt. Teams are virtual workforces are tend to be organic. They move with the environment that affects them. But we'll go into all that as we talk about this. So anyway, once again, a virtual workforce is organic and it changes based on several factors like external and internal influences. So that's kind of what you need to keep in mind. Now, there may be more things that you have to do here. I'm just going to cover the real basics of the issues that I think a virtual workforce needs to put in place. And most of your virtual workforces are not going to be full employee workforces. That might there might be some exceptions to that, but if there are exceptions, they're probably small enough to be considered a team. But a lot of your virtual work environments are ones that are set up by departments, or they have a specific problem function or something like that that you have to deal with. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind, that this isn't something that you're going to probably grab a hold of and distribute through 100,000 person organization like Amazon. That's a different, altogether different kind of environment. But most people might have a regional headquarters. Uh, and they have to manage that headquarters as a virtual group, um, versus the old style where they bring you in continuously to maybe every month to have meetings or something like that and fly you in and fly parts of your team in, but not other parts of the team. Where in this case, the whole team can get involved in that scenario of updating and planning and growing. So that's a good part of about having a virtual team. I think it's important as we go through things. Uh, so, when you talk about, let's just talk about it being a new virtual team. But a lot of this will apply to old teams that are existing if you want to improve their performance and you just happen to have not done a lot of this stuff. But when you have a team, let's take this pandemic situation where everybody was working in an office, maybe you had 8, 10, 15, 20 people in an office, or even could be as many as 100 people in an office, and all of a sudden they can't come to the office. They're locked in their house. But you have a lot of things that have to happen in your organization, and you want to make sure you stay in touch. Now, this could also apply to the whole concept now worldwide, because if you're a global based corporation, you have satellite offices in, Amsterdam or Zurich or London or just about any Paris or just about anywhere in Europe or Saudi Arabia or Iran or any place else around the world, they're probably isolated right now. And so you still have that environment where you're trying to provide stuff to people as a corporation, but your employees have all of a sudden been thrown into a virtual environment. Now, so when I say this doesn't happen in a couple of hours, that's it, building a virtual workforce to be sustainable for weeks or months or from now on, if you choose to do that. You might find that you have a whole situation that can save you a lot of money and you just been forced to train into it before you were ready for it. But you can go into an environment like a virtual environment, and it might be as simple as handing somebody a cell phone and a laptop and saying go work from home. But you can't sustain that. I mean, that's not going to sustain high performance. That's just a stopgap band-aid measure to get you going. So these 3 years here, the technical training, the actual team building of the team, and the team's health, which is basically a maintenance function of the team, are the three categories I want to touch on today that are really important. So if you don't do much of anything else, highly sophisticated, or bring in a bunch of consultants to do all this for you, then this is what I used to do on an ongoing basis with clients, uh, just to sustain a virtual workforce, because they wanted to. They weren't forced into it. They wanted to do it because it made sense. They were either globally decentralized and needed to have that interface on a regular basis, but it was extremely costly to fly people over every month for a monthly meeting on a functional area, um, or situations where they were trying to save cost or improve speed of interaction or something along those lines. So all those kind of reasons why teams were formed, we covered yesterday, Monday the 30th. We covered a lot of that information and, building up to what we need to do. So you kind of needed to know that information. Employees who work in work environments need to know that information. Uh, and so and leaders need virtual workforces need to know that information. So again, encourage you to go back, pick that video up and view it. It's about 40 minutes long, something like that. And it'll be out this afternoon where you can go view it. I also encourage you to register and sign up for these because it's always fun to have something like this in front of you and have somebody there with you signed into the program going that you can sit there on air with who may have been thrust into a virtual work environment and really have never had training about being a virtual worker or a virtual leader if you happen to have control over people who are in the virtual workforce now. So it's always nice because I would take something like, okay, if we're going to talk about technical training, throw out the idea to 2 or 3 people and just let them talk what they thought technical training ought to be about. So we'll have the luxury of that today. It seems like people have a really hard time getting on the air, or they don't want to get on the air. Maybe I'm doing it at the wrong time. I'm not sure. But I don't see a lot of participation during a period of time where really they ought to be very interested in this if they are virtual workers. So all of this, all the series we're going to present over the next few days, because we're going to offer up some potential tools. Like I say, I'm not going to show you how to use those tools because they're proprietary, but you're going to be able to get to them and buy them and use them if you think they're important for you. And some of them belong to me and you can just have, but as we go down through this period. But let's start out. Obviously, you're building a virtual team by that definition, and knowing the barriers and the dynamics of what that's going to look like, you have to begin by understanding you're going to do much of your interaction via what we're doing here today. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is get your people capable. Before you even launch into what the team's all about, you have to give them capable and understanding how to operate with the technology of a work environment. So, let's take a look at that a little bit and see what that might entail. There we go. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. And I want to make sure I haven't okay. Let's see that I'm still up here. For some reason, my video seems to have disappeared. So we're not going to worry about that as long as you're getting the audio over this. The first thing is the software. What are the pieces of equipment that you're going to use to communicate? You have to decide also how you're going to communicate. How are you going to communicate? Is it going to be video conferencing, teleconferencing, whatsoever? I highly, highly recommend, with all the really great tools that are available today, that you do this on a video format. Because for all the reasons I've talked about so much on this show, about the value of a program like Zoom, where you can have all 6 or 8 people in the meeting at one time and you're looking at them. So that makes sense. I think it's important that you do that. The virtual meeting software you choose is going to be important. So you need to select that. Some of it knowing who your team is, and other parts of it. A little hoarse today, so you have to excuse me. So you have to kind of select the software that fits your company's needs, that fit your company's security and restrictive issues, and all that kind of stuff. You just can't just go out and buy something on the Apple Store and get on with it. It's going to have to fit within your organization. It's going to have to suit the needs of the skill level that you're hiring, and if it's international, you're going to have that capability. Like Zoom, I can share this anywhere in the world, so that's kind of a good video conferencing. They have an encrypted, highly encrypted security system. They offer a variety of actual in-room, just meeting room environments like you would have for a team, or a general environment like I'm doing now. So those are things you want to look at. The other thing that you want to consider is what kind of email systems are you going to use? You're going to be on Google, or Chrome, or are you going to be on Microsoft system, or whatever? Everybody pretty much has to be on the same system. So you may have a variety of people, particularly if some of your team happens to be a contractor. Like I use Chrome a lot, but a lot of other people use Microsoft. So it may entail making sure everybody has the same system that they're involved with, or at least they highly integrate to where they can be used effectively. But having the same system is probably the right way to go when it comes to email systems and PowerPoint kinds of programs and things like that. It's better to have everybody on the same system. And of course, interestingly, when I designed this program, it was before you had programs like cloud services and Dropbox and all of these different available ways to put information into file cabinets and share them just seamlessly across the internet while you're discussing. Like right now, if we wanted to, I could go share a particular file with you. I'm not going to go do all that and get into that detail of it, but you want a system like that. You want a system that is highly integrated, easily for everybody to get to, and can sustain, uh, you know, being able to share information and input everybody input. Like with this particular system, I can allow you to control the share screen, and I can give you control of the shared screen, and you can do whatever you want to do with it, and then I can take that control back. Those kinds of features are things you want in an environment, in a system. It should be an integrated email system. It should be an integrated filing system. uh, when you get to phones and phone communication, you want to probably go with a smartphone. Which one is kind of depending on your company and your security protocol and all those kinds of things. And also the flexibility of that phone, what it can and cannot do, where it can and cannot be used. And you have to have a carrier that certainly adapts and adjusts to all of your needs. If you happen to be overseas, you have to have the ability to have a solid, consistent interface that's not going to be broken up because it's international for some reason. And then, of course, important today is just this whole idea about security and the security protocols you have to put in place to protect your data, but also to protect your employees who are operating virtually, who are susceptible, who really share everything through the internet, and basically live and do their work there. They can't just get up at their desk and go over and give it to somebody else. It's transferred electronically in some way. So security is extremely important for virtual workforces. And that's why you just don't go out and buy a bunch of cell phones and a bunch of laptops and pass them out. They have to be set up on the same protocol that your security systems for your organization are set up on. You have to make sure that that data is protected and guarded, particularly, for example, if you were doing this from a medical perspective. There's so many things that you have to look at, and that gets down to the IT policies and the policies in general and the laws and the rules and regulations that go along with things like communicating and transmitting information. Um, if this happened to be a medical virtual work group, you would have boundaries in the United States like HIPAA, which prohibits you from sharing a lot of information. In Europe, that might not be the case, or India, or China, or South America, or Mexico, or wherever you happen to be interfacing with. That may not be the case there. They may not have those same policies, procedures, and regulations. So the team has to come to bear on what is important for them to do and have that is critical to them, uh, but can't violate the laws of other countries. But also, if other companies are too lax, you want to make sure that person in that country understands what all of these policies are and why they exist. So there's a lot to technical training versus uh, you know teaching people how to use an iPhone or teaching people how to use Zoom, uh, the really slick technologies. As everybody really likes to focus on that a whole lot, and that's important for you to do, but it is just an element. All these other things have to be considered, or you will bump into them down the road, and they will create headaches like you've never had before. So these are the aspects of technical training that you have to line out with you and your team, and you guys have to discuss them, and you have to make decision about. It's really good. What's really good about a virtual team that you get people involved, and they can provide you the resources. If you're selecting a phone system and you have somebody who happens to be in Somalia, that person's going to be able to tell you, I couldn't find a tower for this phone to work with anywhere near where I am. So these kinds of things are important when you get your team involved in the planning process for each one of these areas. What's the best software? What works best for everybody? But you know, keeps us consistent. What filing systems will everybody find? And let's come to agreement when we get. And you want that you want them engaged in that process as you're evolving your virtual workforce, because they are the ones that are going to have to use it and live with it. And I mean literally live with it, because that's their only way to work. That's their only connection out there. So you keep that in mind as you're building your team and putting it together. This is probably the first thing you're going to want to tackle. And it might be you might stumble a little bit because you haven't gone into the second thing we're going to tackle, which is the team building side of it. And, if you did this first, I mean, there's a possibility you may want to do this first, but keep in mind, you're trying to do this through this system. So I normally try to put the training up front, and I just live with all the headaches I have to deal with while I'm getting people to buy into all this stuff before they actually become a unified, well-working, high-performance team. So within team building, you have some interesting dynamics. Uh, you have a culture to build. Now, what is a culture? It's really behavior. Culture is something everybody lives with. Everybody comes with a core set of values. They were probably you probably got them from your parents, or maybe some teachers you admired, or your pastor, or maybe a combination of all of those things, make up your sense of core values. And from those core values, you begin to develop a set of belief systems. Some of them are a little more susceptible to outside influence, but some of them are really hardcore, like love and hate and racism, and those kinds of things are very core values that very rarely change. And if they do change, it's usually some radical scenario. But there is a culture. There is a defined culture that research over time has shown provides a high performance effective team. And there's some things that you would like that team to do well, and there's some things you would like that team to avoid if possible. And probably can't all the time, but it would be a minimal amount of their time compared to what you really want them to do, the desired culture. So, what you normally start off with is an actual culture versus a desired culture. And a desired culture has pretty much been painted out there for you by a lot of people who do this work and research. I found trying to do it yourself is time consuming and doesn't always end up where you want it to. But people who've spent a lot of time and energy across a lot of different environments have established an ideal culture for that environment. For example, a virtual workforce should look like this. It's a desired culture. Then, of course, what you have to do is get a snapshot of where you are and what the gap is between where you would like to be and where you are. And then you're going to sort of drop that into a cultural plan, a cultural change plan that you're going to have to define clearly out there. Everybody ought to be on the same page. We ought to be using the same language about it. And everybody ought to be understand what each of the areas are and how those behaviors should operate to be effective in our team. And so you're going to spend some time doing that kind of thing. And that's the first thing you're going to do because that sets the uh, tone, so to speak, for the rest of what your team building will be. And that is building your strategy, your strategic orientation, what you're all about, so to speak. So getting this culture in place, there'll be a lot of evaluations showing how a leader works, and what you would like out of the leader, also what the leader would like out of the workforce, and an assessment of whether those people are at that level or not at that level. And sometimes you have to do that and get through all of that so that everybody is okay with who they are and what their role is, and you can move forward. So, getting that culture in place is very, very important, and sustaining it is even more important over time. Once you do that, you're going to be taking a look at, let's get them out of here, you're going to be taking a look at uh, strategies. And this is your point where we define who you are and what you're about and what you should achieve as a virtual workforce or a team. And you begin with a focused vision, one that is inspirational to you, that excites you, that wants to make you come to work and go get it done because you're doing something. For a long time, the vision that the medical field have of helping and caring for other people and making life just making life better in general wasn't really appreciated as much as it is right now. So, but it's always been a vision for that community of workers, that virtual workforce, if you will. So you have to kind of define what that's going to be, and you definitely want you and your team involved. Now, you may be a subset of a larger organization that has already done this work. So you may want to take a look at their work, but you shouldn't prohibit doing this because they have set up a vision. You shouldn't take the corporate vision and say, okay, this is our vision too. You want to be able to reinforce that. You want to be able to contribute to that vision, but you want to build your own. You want people to grab a hold of something that excites them about your virtual workforce, your team. Then you're going to break that. It normally begins with a broader, probably less detailed statement, saving the world kind of statement. Then you break that down. Well, okay, if we're going to do that, there's got to be a reason why we want to do that, and that becomes your mission, that becomes your purpose, and you define that a little more detail. And so what happens is you might start off with, my vision is to create a unique and improved way of uh, doing retail. Okay, I want to change the retail world. I want it to be better. I want it to be easier for everybody and friendlier for everybody. So then the question becomes, okay, so what's our purpose for doing that? Well, we want to increase people's ability to select products with a minimum amount of effort. And you might get where I'm going here. So you might create a mission that says one of our missions is to ensure customers have availability of as many variety of products as they could possibly ever want. And that might be a mission that Amazon had, and maybe not that one, but in some form or the other, it could have been something like that. Then your goals get a little more specific uh, than the mission, and that is, we want to set up an internet system that will handle the filing, cataloging, controlling of all the products that we can get our hands on out there. And then our objective might be to select the right system to do that, to select the right people to do that, etc. And then you might want to, I'm sorry, that might be creating some strategies. And then you want some very specific objectives with measurable results attached to those. And then you put some actual plans, with people assigned to them and resources assigned to them and timelines assigned to them to get, and performance criteria is set to them for them to be able to get the job done. So that's what you're doing with your team. Your team has a vision. It has a purpose. There's some underlining goals initially that you will start this with. They may change over the next year and a half. Probably should, in fact. And for those goals, now we can sit down and say, okay, for this year, this is what we want to get done. And then you put those objectives to it. After you have those strategies laid out, we're going to go down this path, this path, this path, some very specific objectives that you put to that. And then you establish some operational plans that actually go where you go do these things, and hopefully you will, at the end of doing all of this, you will reach your goal and your vision will be a little more in sight. It'll get closer and closer to you. And a lot of this has to do with integrating with a larger environment, like a corporate environment or something like that. You can't go off and create something that's anti-corporate. It's at odds with the corporate vision. But you can certainly, as a team, and all of your people and the leader together, come up with uh, these strategies that will, the strategic approach that will make your team have purpose, and it'll clarify a lot for a team. A team needs, particularly a virtual workforce, needs to be very clear about what they're expected to do and to what level they're expected to do it. And they need to not just hear it, they need to understand it and believe in it and want to do it, because they are going to be self motivated to a large extent. So that's part of what has to happen from the strategic side of things. Now, once we do that, we have to take a look at the team in terms of its performance in general. Uh, there has to be, once you have all of these tactical plans laid out, if you will, operational plans, things that have to be done, okay, somebody's going to have to go do those things. So you need to define the roles, or another way of saying the jobs, but they're more than jobs. They're actually roles that people play that they're going to have to do in order for this stuff to get executed like you want it done. And with that, once you define what every role is going to be, you really need to put some sort of, how am I going to know if that role's being done like it's supposed to be done? And that's called a performance criteria. And when you put that performance criteria to that specific role, now you can go out and look for somebody who can get that role instituted and operating in a way that it should be. And so it's a little more than just quote a job description. It's people truly understanding, because they may be changing that role as it goes along. And particularly in a virtual world where you're not going to have a lot of people looking over your shoulder, or your boss looking over your shoulder a lot. uh, you're out there pretty much on your own in some cases. You have to feel good enough about your role to be motivated to go accomplish the things you need to accomplish. And so once you do that, once you have those roles established, a little easier to come back in and define the measurements for those roles and establish the policies and guidelines for the interaction of all those roles and the behavior of all those roles against the culture. So now you can go, now that you have your culture, your strategic focus, your roles clearly defined, your performance criteria, you can come in and start putting together how, what are going to be the rules of engagement for this team? How are we going to operate? How are we supposed to behave? And if, there's a lot of stuff on TV about SWAT and SEAL team and all these kinds of unique units. This is pretty much how they operate. They operate in a manner that's very clear, very concise, makes their job real easy. They're focused on it. Everybody understands what everybody else is doing. Those kinds of things are very critical. They're more critical for a virtual workforce because that person may not have the frequency of interaction or the support structure underneath them. If it's not put into the team's behaviors, they may not have that kind of support structure to really feel comfortable, in making a decision. Because you're going to have somebody who's going to make a decision out here in a virtual workforce. They might need to make a decision, and that boss may not be available at the time that decision needs to be made. And they're just, they're going to have to feel comfortable enough to make the decision, even if it's a wrong decision. They have to live with the consequences of it. They can go back and fix it. So how all of this is going to be handled, it falls in within this team building process where you have to discuss these dynamics as a team so everybody feels comfortable, that they have the confidence and the resources to do what they need to do. Okay. So these are the areas of actual team building. So you can see this doesn't go on in a day. there's a lot of underpinning research that you go out and assess and find out information about before you go in and talk about the culture. There's a lot of dialogue and the team here. These are things that evolve over time using a variety of tools like a balanced scorecard system or something like that. These are tools that help you do these things, but there are things that take time to do. They don't happen in a day long session. They evolve and become better and better as you go on down as a virtual team. But you have to at least begin, you have to have some sort of methodology and process for all of this to get done in a reasonable period of time so the team can operate effectively. So this pretty much a team building session is critical as part of your first function right after you get done, because you're going to do this team building in the environment, the technical environment that you have established, the virtual environment you've established as your working world. You're going to do your team building in that environment because that's going to show you a lot of the issues you're going to have to deal with, a lot of the barriers you're going to have to deal with, and come up with solutions to overcome them. So the team building becomes not just a community building process, but also a process of how we're going to cope. And so if you use that process to do your team building, you get practice with your technical training, and you get a lot of community and collegial commitment to everybody discussing all these issues. So it's a very, very important thing. So you've got your team built, and you're going on down the road, and you'll see the next few phases are review processes and celebrations and things like that. And what really helps you sustain is the time and commitment that you put in to your team or your workforce's, your virtual workforce's health. And so that's kind of important. It's if you think about it like the healthier, the more you commit to doing the healthy stuff with your body and your life and your mental attitude, the more you feel like you can get done. And the healthier you are, the better you feel, the more you feel you can do. So that's pretty much true about the team's health. So let's take a look at the team's health a bit. There are some things you want to be involved in. The first thing you need to understand is frequency of meetings, frequency of interaction. Now, it doesn't have to be the team all meeting together all the time, but each of the team members has to have enough frequency of interaction with other team members and the leader to feel a sense of community, a sense of belonging. That's a very important feeling that happens in a work environment. You sometimes make friends in a work environment. A lot of times they'll go, when you get off work, you'll go to the bar, just down the street, and you'll talk about the day and talk about everybody else, and everything gets, you get into those habits of what a community or friends or associates, if you will, that enjoy being around each other and dialoguing. And this has to happen virtually also. You have to have these kinds of dialogues, these kinds of same sessions that you do if you were going to the office building every day. You want those kinds of things happening. That's one reason why video conferencing today is such a blessing, because if you are virtually separated, like geographically by distances, even cultures, etc., this communicating with each other and developing the relationships and allows us to get in and help each other become better and better at what we do. And that should be the goal of every leader in the group, of every virtual work group. And that is that every person in that group has the potential to reach to heights that they aspire to or would like to, or maybe even can't even visualize right now, but the leader sees it. So there's a frequency of meetings, and meeting on a frequent basis is very, very important. You can't allow somebody to have a 7 o'clock meeting in the morning on Monday morning and not talk to them the rest of the week. There are people who like that, but it doesn't really build the community and the character of the team that you need to have in a virtual workforce. You need to define how to problem solve, because not only will you be problem solving on your own, but you'll be problem solving in unison with a group. But they're going to be a group that may not have the ability to get up and go talk to other people and then come back and do something. You have to have a system. If you need that kind of interaction, you have to have it clearly defined how that's going to happen in your virtual workforce, more so than if you're in just an office building. Because in office building, it kind of comes natural to us. In terms of being, 5,000 miles away from somebody, and, you know, uh, time variances of 14 hours difference, you have to figure these things out, because do I just sit there and wait, or am I comfortable in calling so and so at 3 o'clock in the morning, and getting them online and saying, hey, wake up. I know you're in your pajamas, but, just stay covered and let's talk for a minute. I got this problem I need to solve. So those things have to happen in a virtual workforce. That's why you have to bond as a team really, really well. So problem solving is one of those things you're going to do as a team and individually, and you just need to have that skill set. You need to know how to do that effectively, and you need to know how to do it within a workforce environment that's virtual. Then you have socialization. We talked about this probably to the end of time, the last time we met last Monday, but socialization is important. You don't just have to get online to discuss a business item. You can get online for an hour or so and share things. It's virtually cost. It doesn't cost anything to do that. You just it's good to do things like celebrate birthdays and celebrate events and lives, and be there for people when they're having difficulties the same way you would in a regular work environment, even more important for a virtual work environment. And celebrations and celebrations and celebrations and celebrations are critical. You really need to have celebrations, folks. Celebrate even the smallest victories. If somebody falters, go in and help them up, pick them up off the floor, brush them off, and help them to get back into the situation. Go solve that problem. When you do, celebrate it. Celebration is a thing we don't even do in standard work environments very well, but in virtual work environments, it is part of the integral body of who you are and what you need to be doing. You need to celebrate. And then the last thing that really builds health is that sense that you can grow. You can become better than you were when you got into this workforce and this team. You can enhance yourself. And this is a real chance for leaders to shine out there with virtual workforces. When those virtual workforce members are the ones that you don't mind uh, looking at, and you want to consider them for promotions, that's a very healthy environment. That's a very healthy environment. So you want to do those kinds of things. Now, there are all kinds of tools to do this stuff with, whether it's team building or there's not, there's building health structures, team health, technical training. There's all kinds of tools out there to do these things with. There's You know, I mentioned culture. I'll just give you an example of a couple of them. Okay, so I'm not going to go into everything in detail, but I'll just give you an example of a couple of them that I used in the past. One in particular I'd like to show you. Let's go over here and take a look at, let's see, yeah, no, I need to come up right in here, I think. And let me bring down, I have a panel up here that I'm using right now. So let me just get rid of that. So that should hide that panel. There we go. Now, you weren't seeing it, but I was. It was covering some of my stuff. So I'm looking here at this is a company I use for almost 20 years, and the reason I use them is they integrated leadership, team building, corporate culture, individual development and performance into a variety of things. So let me just kind of give you an overview. Let's see. Group team. There's group and team development. They even have a specific segment for that. That I don't. When I first joined them, they didn't. They just had the leadership stuff, but they've integrated. They've done so much with so many tools, and this is a highly data-based program, and you can buy it, and it's online, and a lot of this stuff can be done by in a virtual world. You can learn to be effective assessments of groups and teams, measure team performance, synergy in their group, member styles, their learning skills. These are important things because as a team member, you want to be able to say amongst each other, hey, I'm really good at this, but I'm not really too good at that, and I don't even want to do that. And other team members may be good at that, but they're not good at what you like to do. And you need to know that about each other so you know when each one of the team members might rise up to the leadership role and help get the team along to its final solution through those processes, is knowing what you do well, what your team members do well, and then allowing whatever team member is in there to surface and manage the process so that all of you get the team, the total workforce, if you will, virtual workforce, that everybody gets their goal hit. But it happens in a way that everybody integrates so well because they know each other and they know their strengths and weaknesses, and they allow those strengths and weaknesses to be part of what makes the team really go and help. And so now how do leaders use that? They use that by taking a look at this assessment, and they can say, hey, look, I got a lot of people who like to plan, a lot of people who want to generate ideas, but I don't have many people who want to take it to fruition and make it happen. So I need to find the next few people. I either need to add some people to my team and have that skill set and that desire, or I need to, when the next person I hire in here needs to have that skill set. So that's how this works. And they have all kinds and they do it through some exciting ways, through team building simulations like Desert Survival and things like that. Some of you probably heard that. I've used that a lot. There's a lot of these tools like this you can attach motivation to and other things in that light. They also, when you come down here, they also look at the culture in general, and they can actually tie the leadership's behavior to whether they're reinforcing that culture or not. So there's some really strong things in this group called human synergistics. I will try to put their link onto the comments section of this video. Like I said, I've dealt with them for 20 years. This is a group, bar none. I've had a tremendous amount of success changing organizations at very high levels, at corporate high levels, uh, and also at uh, virtual workforce levels and team levels, departmental levels. This can work across the organization. It's pretty amazing. I've done a full corporate transformation premised on work associated with this group. So I would recommend them highly in that kind of. But there are other things you can do along the way. Um, Here's a virtual team setup checklist that I pulled out of some article. Maybe it was a Harvard Business Review article or something like that. But this is, I mean, there are people who specialize. Here's a setup checklist. Here's performance expectation. Obviously, I've done pull some of this out of here. Performance expectation and membership, security and infrastructure, home office expenses, safeties. I didn't get into a lot of the minute details that I didn't cover in this, but it's just a form that you could play around with that allows you to structure some things. Um, and I think you're either doing that or no, you're not. And here's some comments you might await. And when you pull this together, now this isn't something that each individual does, although they could do this, and then you guys could discuss the variances between each other. That'd be a good team building exercise. But that's kind of one of the team building sessions you would have. Let's go over this checklist. Maybe it's an early part of your team building process. Uh, this one here, what makes your team tick, is very much like human synergistic, but in a more simplistic way. You can have people take a survey, and once they take the survey, it'll graph them on a little chart about what their whether their interests are more into initiation or idea generation or completion. And this is proves out and they graph it out here for you, so you can see how the whole team looks, and you can see where an individual looks using the same graphic and the same concepts. That is the idea of building a team, is keeping that everybody on the same communication, and the simplicity of that communication helps you to make some decisions real quick. If I had everybody all over here, then I'm going to have a lot of ideas. I'm not going to get anything done. On the other hand, I have people over here, they're anxious and ready to go do a lot of things. They just don't have anything to do. So you need a balance, obviously, in this kind of thing. So that's some of what you will see in this process. So let me bring this back up here. So you get an idea here of what it is to be part of a virtual team. And it's important. This is a little bit longer session, but it's important that you understand that this is an ongoing process. It doesn't just happen once. It should be part of your DNA, so to speak, as a team. It's something you want to keep healthy and work on and do what it takes to make it healthy and keep it going. So I hope these ideas generate some things. If you're out there and you were thrown into this virtual workforce environment and you're struggling with how it's working, or it's frustrating you or whatever, maybe you need to stop back up and maybe start a structured approach to how you can be a more effective team. Okay, I'm Vic Vogt. This is What the Flip podcast. This is our special series on virtual workforces, and which mostly end up being virtual teams. And we're going to cover several things along the path to becoming a highly effective team. So as we go through these processes over the next, next 3 days after today. When you I'll put all of these into what I call on my website. It's a playlist of videos. So once a video is processed and people who want to go view it can go view it, I'm going to probably download that and I will drop this into the Facebook playlist. And these are all, real basic, high level thought processes about what you need to do to be a high performance virtual workforce. There are a lot of things deeper than this you'll have to dig into, and that will be a good experience for you because be a learning experience for you. So, or you can go hire a consultant to come in and help you do these things. That's for sure. You just want to make sure you find one that's going to fit your team. So maybe you might want the team, the whole workforce, to do the interview over the air, like Zoom. Okay? You have a great day. I'll talk to you next time. You can like my Facebook page, What the Flip, and follow me. And stay tuned for more broadcasts of this podcast, What the Flip. Until then, have a great day.